Hello, everybody. I hope everyone is well seated by now, and I think it's time that we start so that we also don't have all those people who are watching us over web stream wait for too long. My name is Andrea Bodova, and I am the acting head of unit called Events here at the European Committee of the Regions, and it is my big pleasure to welcome you all here to join us in the discussion and in reflection about a topic that is quite close to our hearts, and that is, how to design a new model on European citizens' consultations. This is a topic or reflection that, of course, doesn't start here today around this, across this kind of panel and with you. It is something that we've been kind of reflecting for a while now, and it more recently, just a few weeks back, it got a strong support in the declaration that the European Committee of the Regions adopted in the 8th Summit of Regions and Cities in Bucharest. It is something that back in December 2018, the President of the European Committee of the Regions, together with the President of the European Economic and Social Committee, called for in their non-paper when they really try to start a discussion about a new model, how to kind of better engage citizens in the European decision-making. And the reflections and the urge to start designing something new is also based on our experience and from the kind of field work that we have done together with strong support of our members over the past few years. From, I think it was March 2016 until very recently, February 2019, we have held about more than 200 so-called local events where we engaged the local level citizens at the local level in the debate on the future of Europe. And there were a few interesting things that came out very clearly throughout this process. And first, I'd say that these dialogues, debates with local level need to remain, so they need to be permanent. And I am happy to also see and hear that this is something that is echoed not only in our house, but also amongst the other institutions. And second, that it should, if we continue, we should do it in a more structured way. And this is why we're here, and this is why we're setting up this series of 5 lunchtime seminars where we bring experts who have done the consultations, who have consulted citizens at the local level, so there are real practitioners, and we'll have four seminars like this with about 20 of them throughout March and throughout April and May. And there will be a 5th one as well, the last one on the 7th of May, that we will bring researchers, more academics, and we will hear also from their side what they have to kind of say to this topic. This will help us. We're hoping that all these debates and all these reflections will help us really to conceptualize this new model. We will also together with these experts that we will have here prepare a publication where we will dig a bit deeper into questions and methodologies and how to go about it. And we plan to really have a launch of this new concept later in the fall, in the autumn of this year, with full-on kind of launch in 2020. With that being said, it is my pleasure to really introduce our 4 speakers here today. I would first turn to my right side, where I would like to introduce Marcin Gerwin, who is expert in deliberative democracy, and he's coming to Brussels from Gdańsk in Poland. Further, closer to me from my right side is Urmo Kübar, who is the civil society advisor to the President of Estonia. On my left-hand side, I'm pleased to welcome Vanessa Cotterell, who's the policy manager in European Movement International. And I have also the pleasure to welcome Christian Matthijs, who is the representative of government of Baden-Württemberg from Germany. Before I give the floor to the speakers, I would just really like to run very quickly through how we're going to run this session. It's going to take part in 3 parts. It's going to be in English and it's web streamed. So, and I would also really like to ask you very kindly to put your mobile phones on silent, but do not put them away because you will need them later on in the session. In the first part, our 4 speakers will briefly bring to you, share with you the experience from the case studies that from the projects that they have carried out in their areas. The second part of the session will focus on 3 questions that will be kind of a red thread throughout the whole series. So we will be asking the same question to all our speakers at the next seminars. The first question will really try to look more closely at how we select the participants in the consultations or the assemblies and how to apply that to the European model. The second question will look at the topic, so how to really structure the topic in any meaningful way. And then the third question, of course, will have to really kind of try to get a first feeling what our experts think about how we can then bring results of these consultations to the European decision making. So with that being said, and I also would like to say that don't worry, I mean, I know this is lunchtime and some of you may be already slightly hungry, but we will not leave your stomachs completely empty, and there will be lunch for you offered after this session. With that being said, I would like to give the floor to Martin Gerwin to share his experience with us. Thanks.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to come to Brussels. And our experience in Gdańsk, actually it's in Lublin as well, because the model that we use, the citizens' assemblies, are getting popular and other cities are becoming interested. And actually what we do is not just public consultations, it's a decision-making process. Because the rule that we have introduced in Poland is that whenever there is a support for the recommendation, which passes the mark of 80%, the mayor declares that it is binding for him. So actually what we are doing in Poland on this local level is introducing the new form of democracy, which is based on deliberation. So the citizens' assemblies are getting more and more popular around the world. For me personally, the inspiration was the model from Australia. I have learned from the New Democracy Foundation. You might have heard about the example of Ireland, where recently there was this famous citizens' assembly on abortion, which led to the referendum and later on to the change of the constitution. So actually in Ireland they didn't start with the local level, they started with the constitutional changes at the very beginning. So, and in Poland, however, the first citizens' assembly was introduced in the city of Gdańsk, like 2 or 3 years ago, and the first topic for us was how to prevent the city from being flooded again. And because due to climate change, we had some extreme rainfall, and the group of citizens was invited to deal with this topic. So what does it mean actually, the citizens' assembly? On the local level, it is a city in a miniature, in a small scale. Since it's not practical to debate with the whole group of citizens, which is more than 350,000 people in Gdańsk, you create a city on a small scale. You look at the certain demographic criteria, which is gender, which is age, education level, and we also use district. So all people from all districts of Gdańsk, for example, come to the meetings, and they are all selected randomly. So there are certain. What are the premises actually behind this whole concept? Is that when you want to make decisions which are for the best of the public good, you need time to learn about the issue. It's very helpful as well to deliberate, to talk with other people. And you need time to digest the issue thoroughly and then to have a clear mind what is the best possible solution. So that's the premise behind the concept of effective democracy is to have well-informed decisions which are made for the common good. So how does it happen that the citizens' assemblies, what makes them work? So actually the random selection is crucial because all people who become the members of the citizens' assembly are independent. They are not dependent on their party politics and so on, so they are chosen by lot. There is a diversity of perspectives in the room. So you can hear from old people, from young people, and you can hear from perspective of people who run bicycles, who run cars, who run public transport. There's a huge diversity of perspectives, of views. And there also, it's in contrary to in some cases referenda, there is a long part which is designated for learning, for education. Experts come. It's possible to listen to the presentations, to ask them questions, and so on. There are also written materials presented so that the members of the Citizen Assembly get the best possible knowledge about the issue. And when the stakeholders are invited, for example, NGOs and other institutions, they come on equal grounds. What does it mean? They have equal time, let's say 10 minutes, and the order is also selected by lot. And the common good of the city or of the country, because it can be done on a country, even international level, is always from the very beginning at the heart of the process. And since it is all well facilitated, the favorable conditions for deliberation are created. So we start with sending out to the residents letters of invitations, and this is done through random selection. The letters are signed by the mayor, if the mayor is the person who is inviting the residents. And in the letter you can find all the information about the topic, about the dates, and members of the Citizens' Assembly receive some kind of a small, like a, not stipend, like not remuneration? Yeah, so kind of money, yes? So it's like 150 euro, okay. That's what they receive. But it's a really long process, so it does make sense. It takes a couple of Saturdays. And for the random selection, we use actually the website random.org from Ireland. And since we try to create this process as real as possible and as transparent as possible, we used true randomness. What does it mean? The computer cannot do anything at random. You need an algorithm. So if you want true randomness, you need something physical. And what they do at random.org, they use the noise of the atmosphere. And they have radio receivers which catch the noise of the atmosphere. So if you ask who selected the members of the Citizen Assembly, we can say that at the very beginning it was the noise of the atmosphere. So, and the second stage, when people register, because it's voluntary, people register, oh, I want to come, there is a website, or they can call by phone. The second random selection for the final group of members of the Citizen Assembly is done by hand, by throwing a dice, which is transmitted live on the internet. There is a studio in Gdańsk, which is very handy, actually, because it's very easy for us to create live presentation. So one of the key factors of why does it all work, from my perspective, is about creating a good atmosphere. We really take care of this point. So, and when people come to the Citizen Assembly, there is this like an integration phase at the very beginning, so that they can get to know each other, and they can have this comfortable feeling that they feel well with this group. They know this group. There are also certain rules created of how people communicate. It is all based on respect, on openness, on listening to other points of views. And that's why this phase of deliberation, when people start to talk in small groups or at the plenary, it really does work. It's not like the parliament. It's a completely different setting, yes. So one of the key aspects actually to do it, you need skilled facilitators. And also inviting experts, the best possible experts, it's also one of the fundamental aspects of success, because people follow the knowledge of experts. So that's also where the recommendations, the initial recommendations come from the experts. Certainly the members of the Citizen Assembly can propose them as well, but there is usually a huge number of recommendations from the experts. And there is this time factor, because it's also important, because people, when we do it on the local level, people come on Saturdays, and it's several Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's a long time, and it's important that people actually have this time for deliberation and also for personal reflection on the topic. So, and we also invite the mayor to come at the very beginning and to say in person that whatever comes out of this group, when it reaches the point of 80% of support, I will do it. So this is very important for people to hear this directly for the mayor in person. So, and all this learning phase is transmitted live on the internet. A friend of mine connected his laptop to his TV at home, and he was sitting on his couch and watching the session of the Citizens Assembly in Gdańsk. So it's that quality. So, and to sum up, the key ingredients for success, the whole process needs to be well designed from the very beginning of random selection, the creation of programs, invitations for experts, and so on, and the deliberation part, actually how you do it. So for the coordinators and for people who organize the Citizen Assembly, the basic premise is to trust people, that they can come up with good, high-quality decisions at the end. This is the important part. And as I have mentioned, bringing to the table the best possible experts is crucial, because that's where the recommendations come from. And for the mayor and for the city hall or for the government, there should be the willingness to implement the results. And if it happens so, then people perceive it as a success. So, and there is a guide to the citizens' assemblies, which is available in 6 languages, and you can download it from the website citizens.org, citizenassemblies.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin, for these very useful insights, and thank you very much for your very short and crisp presentation, which I think I'm very much hoping that this is an example that will be followed by other speakers, so that we have enough time also to discuss further and also discuss with audience. And with that, I give the floor to Urmo Küber, who will share with us his experience from encouraging public participation in Estonia.
Yes, there is a popular quotation often attributed to Winston Churchill that the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with an average voter. Actually, there is no proof that Winston Churchill has ever said anything like this, but as it's sort of cheeky and funny and smart, it continues to live. Although I doubt that any politician would say anything like this, especially during election campaigns. However, this was a quotation that was often reminded to us 6 years ago when we came up with an initiative that we called People's Assembly, which was a reaction to a growing dissatisfaction with policy-making processes in Estonia. When I say that I mean a group of civil society organizations. Back then I was working for Network of Estonian Non-Profit Organization, which is an umbrella body of non-profits in Estonia. This growing dissatisfaction was on one hand triggered by a financing scandal where a prime minister's party was accused of accepting illegal donations. But more generally, I guess it was the feeling of growing gap between politicians and the public. As it is normal in civil society, there were petitions signed by people, there were some protests on the street, but we were thinking, is it is this the best that we as civil society can do? Is it only a choice between participating in any elections or then protesting when you don't like the outcome of policy making? And our answer is that we should try something else, and probably these two options aren't the best that we could do. We can come up with something better. So we started with crowdsourcing. We opened the website and identified 5 topics that were central to the debate back then, such as party financing, election campaigns, internal party regulations, etc. And this website was open to anybody, and within 3 weeks we got more than 70,000 visits and about 1,500 posts with altogether 6,000 ideas under these 5 topics. And remind you that it was 3 weeks and a small country of 1.3 million people. So the participation was really active. Of course, these 6,000 ideas, among them were many that were repeating itself. So these ideas need to systemized and categorized. So this was the next phase where experts stepped in first by dividing all this input into 59 subcategories. For example, when the wider topic was party financing, the subcategories could be donations from individuals, donations from private companies, public funding for parties, membership fees, etc. All these subcategories and these ideas under these subcategories were then commented by a wide range of experts, both practitioners and academics, who then added their initial impact analysis on what could happen if these changes would be made. And then we invited those people who the authors of these ideas and experts together and organized a series of seminars where they sat around tables and went through all these ideas and expert comments on them. And at the end of these seminars, people voted on these ideas based on 2 criteria. How relevant was this provided solution towards the goal, and how much impact what is the impact, whether does it solve the whole issue or just a small part of it? And those issues that were voted most relevant and having the biggest impact were then taken to the 3rd phase, which was the deliberation day. That we needed it because we saw that although the website was open to everybody, it clearly wasn't a representative sample of people who participated. Clearly, there was some groups underrepresented, but as all these topics are relevant across the society, then we wanted to hear also those voices who are not that active in stepping forward and making their voice heard. So on the deliberation day, we put together a random sample of a society, just like in Gdansk case. So based on demographics, again, such as region, age, gender, education, etc. And more than 300 people gathered in one room. They were divided between tables of 8 to 10 people, and each participant was provided with materials that explained the topic and the comments that both the authors and experts had made to these ideas. And with a facilitator for the table whose task was to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. The task was not to find a consensus, but to have a discussion based on these ideas. And at the end of this discussion, each participant gave their individual preference on different solutions. Even more important for us than the particular outcome on these ideas was, does this method work? And could this be a solution to bringing this gap between politicians and public closer? And so we asked for feedback from participants, and at the end of the day, 98% of participants said that this method allowed them to present their viewpoints and to make their voice heard, which is much larger numbers than normal citizens feel on everyday basis. 89% said that the final voting results were quite in accordance with their own preferences, so they were quite happy about these voting results. 40% said that they were very happy, 49% that they are all right with the results, even if they weren't exactly their first preference, but they felt that, yeah, the process was fair, and so they accepted it. 87% said that through these discussions they learned new things about these topics, so they didn't have all the information. So, for example, if we would just address them through public opinion polls, then they would have given their answers based on much smaller amount of information, and 82% said that these discussions made them more interested in these topics, which is also one of the goals. Only 12% said that these topics were too complicated for them. So if prepared with proper materials and given enough time, people could actually understand them and have these discussions. And an interesting question was also, does all this make any difference, or do people still stick to their initial views? So we asked whether they changed any of their viewpoints, and 70% said that to some extent yes, based on this new knowledge that they had, based on these discussions, they were also open to change their initial viewpoints. So this leads me to summing this experience up by saying that yes, a best argument against democracy could be a 5 minutes conversation with an average voter, but the problem is that far too often we are willing to only dedicate 5 minutes to speaking with people. But if we're given more time and better conditions, then definitely an average voter could come up with could turn into a good argument for democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Urmo. And now I turn to Vanessa, who can share with us her insights and her views, how these types of consultations are enhancing the democratic participation in Europe. Vanessa, please.
Hello. So I hope your attention span is still there. Being the third one, it gets trickier and trickier. The order makes sense, though, I think, in the way we've been talking, because we started with a very sort of local example. We've carried on to a national example, and now I'm trying to maybe bring in a different dimension, which is the European dimension, because I think it gets harder and harder the further away you get from this local level to engage people and to engage citizens and get their opinion and carry that all the way back to the European institutions. So I'm speaking in the capacity of a broad network of civil society organizations across Europe, but not only. So we represent citizens, youth organizations, businesses, trade unions, academia, which all have a different perspective. So our goal in this sense is to get all these different perspectives together and carry them back to the institutions and to create a dialogue and a debate. So in the sense, we have participated, or some of our members in the different European Union countries have engaged and have already for years been organizing dialogues and citizens' consultations in their own way and their different formats. And in the framework of the consultations as they were launched last year, we've seen some activities in various countries. Obviously, France was one of the very active countries, also among our members, with I think around 130 consultations. We also had our member in Denmark, in Ireland, being quite active. I think also next week there's going to be a debate where a member in Ireland is going to present their experiences. So it was very hard from all this feedback to get maybe one sort of key message. What did we learn from all these consultations? Not only the ones organized last year, but also the ones in the debates and the activities that we've been doing throughout the past decades, and how can we change that in the future and make this process more participative and more engaging. So that's why I chose one, and I hope this is not going to be rocket science. It's going to be something that is probably common sense and something that you will already have guessed, which is that there's a large appetite among citizens to engage on the EU and on issues that relate to the EU, which is something that we all probably knew, but I think it's also something that we need to remind ourselves of. And when we organize these consultations in the future, whether they're at a local level, whether they're at a national level, or at a European level, that citizens are there to have a say. So if we ask them to have a say, we also need to take into account that whatever they tell us afterwards, that we have to use that in the future. So I think that's where one of the sort of the key points comes in, which is the follow-up. If we don't do anything with citizens' opinions, we just let them speak. Maybe we organize panel debates. We allow them to voice their opinions in Q&As. But if at the end of this, we don't take their points of views and get back to them and say, this is what we've done with your opinion, then we kind of ignore this whole idea that citizens want to have a say, because they're not there to just listen, obviously. So ahead of the consultations last year, inspired by our member in Germany, we put together a set of criteria ahead of the consultations, which could be used. It could also definitely be further elaborated and advanced. The key point here, I think, is to start off with clear objectives, as we've heard before, and to make sure that there's a follow-up at the end. And then there's all these other different criteria that come in that we've heard some before already. I think diversity, bottom-up is clearly important, meaning that the topics that are discussed come from a bottom-up approach and that are not set top-down. The transparency of the whole process, what is happening with all these results, what are we doing with the responses of citizens in these consultations or dialogues. The consistency, media coverage, I think, is also very important. If we don't talk about them, if people in different countries don't know about, say, for example, the consultations in Estonia, then it stays a very national or a very local debate. So I think the European dimension is very important here. And so overall, I would say that what we've learned, but not only what we've learned, what maybe remain the key challenges in the future. And I chose this, and I didn't know what the setting of this room was, I swear. Meaning that we can change the structure and the whole setting of debates and of consultations, but if changing the whole sort of setup is not going to change the actual essence of citizens' participation. So one of the challenges and the things that I think we have to work out a bit better in the future is the structured organization. We can randomly organize different consultations. They can be local, national, European, in different countries. But what we've seen so far in our network, that in some countries they have taken place, in some countries civil society was involved, in some cases they weren't involved at all. In some cases the government was very active and just asked our member to slap on the logo and say, whatever debates you organize in that time, let's call them European Citizens Consultations, so we can add, to the number of events we organize. So if it ends up to be just a number of events, it's not going to work. The bottom-up agenda setting, which I mentioned before, letting citizens say and decide beforehand what they want to talk about. They don't have to have an opinion on everything. It could be something related to environment, to migration. But we need to listen to them first to know what to talk about, and then link that to the European or the institutional agenda. Outreach is also hard. How do we reach all citizens? I think we've had some concrete examples, and that's also very useful for us to know. And when we approach citizens, because obviously we have a broad network, but we don't reach everyone, and that's where we're trying to broaden our network and include more organizations to bring in more people. Diversity is always tricky, and I don't mean only in the sense of gender, also age, background. When we look at the numbers, who votes, I think, for example, unemployed people are very low, so how do we reach those, for example? Real dialogue. I think the majority of the consultations last year in that framework of the European consultations, many were panel debates, many included a lot of speeches. So we want to try and avoid those kinds of formats and have a real assembly, or whatever you want to call it. And the follow-up strategy in the end, which is also a big question mark currently. How do we follow up with this? What do we do with the results? And is this just to get their opinion, or do we actually want their input on, for example, certain policies, EU policies? So I think that would be sort of my broad perspective.
Thank you, Vanessa, for this very, very clear presentation. Now that we kind of landed at a city level, we've touched a bit at the national level. We've landed also touching a bit of a European sphere. I think it's time to land in one of the Länder of Germany, which is Baden-Württemberg, and I would invite Christian to share his experience.
Okay, thank you very much to be here for the invitation and the initiative, the Council of Regions. First of all, I would apologize for my rusty English because of less usage in the last 2 years. So it's not impoliteness when I look down to my notices here. Please notice that. Okay. As you already said, we started a dialogue on the whole region, on the regional level in Baden-Württemberg. Here in the first slide, you see the logo and the result already. The result of the dialogue process was the state government of Baden-Württemberg's guiding principles on Europe. Let me say a few words to the starting point. In 2016, we got the Brexit referendum, and directly afterwards, our first minister, our prime minister, Winfried Kretschmann, you have a picture there for them of you who don't know him so far, decided, okay, we have to do something about this because we are in danger to get an European Union that we don't want to. At the same time, you had the starting point of the debate about the future of the European Union by the Commission and the very enthusiastic and motivated keynote speech by the French president in September 2017. I say this, or I noticed this, because we took them seriously on the regional level, and this is not was not normal about all the regions in Germany. We decided, okay, we could not let only the federal government react on this debate on European level and in other countries. The regional level as well has to do something about the debate on the future of Europe. Okay. So if you like to say, we had at the same point a suitable situation about the discussion with the citizens about the future of Europe or the European Union in general. You have an interest on the EU level, so you probably had the chance to get the results handed out to decision makers on European and federal level, and the administration and the staff who is organizing the citizens' dialogues had the political backing on the highest level, highest possible level in the region. The structure of the dialogue was complex. If you see the slide, first of all, we chose an expert panel with 20 persons. They were chosen not randomly. They were chosen, let's say, all the political, economical, and societal groups, and also of the civil society, which we thought we would need on the ongoing process after the dialogue. we have as well, we founded as well 4 expert panels in the themes of youth, cities, innovation, security, and environmental protection. And for the background, there were founded 2 teams in 2 different ministries, corporate identity and the agency for sampling of results and for moderation. There were as well more, let me say, public arrangements, but we will focus now on the theme of today, on the citizens' dialogues. We got 4 regional cities dialogues with randomly selected citizens in medium-sized cities in all 4 administrative districts of Baden-Württemberg. And 2 bigger central citizens dialogues in Stuttgart and Freiburg. They were designed like the citizens dialogues of the European Union. So we got the backing of the Commission with Günther Oettinger, who is from Baden-Württemberg, and as well we were very happy because we got a lot of attention to the process in the region with Jean-Claude Juncker one time in Freiburg. Beside this, we did an online survey with about, at the final, after 3 months, only 500 participants. So we got not the representative level, but for a theme like how do you think about the future of Europe, I think 500 people are quite good. Okay. This just show that we tried to do all the events in divided over or diversified over the country. Okay, the focus with the citizens dialogues with randomly selection. The goal was to gather as much as possible different opinions and perceptions about the future of Europe. And the methodical way was that we worked very close together with the cities, and they made a random selection of the directory of inhabitants on the municipal levels. So we say to them, okay, we will, or 1,000 persons of the 20,000 persons who live in Bad Mergentheim, for example, they get a letter. And so please choose 1,000 persons on your directory of inhabitants. We leave the cities the way how they choose this 1,000 people, but all of them did it like pointing by finger or something like that. So it was randomly. Okay, there are many ways of doing that, or like we heard already today, with different cohorts and different criteria for selection. Aware that we created this list with people with the minimum age of 16. We investigated the demographic composition along the criteria gender and age only, and we made 4 cohorts. You see, no, don't. You see in the 3rd line about age. After the random selection, there are more, you have to consider that certain cohorts are more or less likely to register or to come to events like that. Therefore, the weight was laying down more on youth, on the youngest group. We invited double more people from the youngest group than from the other groups. Okay. Very important step was that we didn't make the invitation by the major. Because of that, I mentioned the political backing. This 1,000 persons per city were getting a letter directly from the First Minister or from the State Council for civic participation in Baden-Württemberg. So let me say, on a very high level for a person who normally never got something from the state, who is not, I don't know, have nothing to do with traffic or something like that, and is normally not willing to go on a Saturday to an event and to talk about the future of Europe. I suppose a lot of them called us as well. They were very surprised when they got a letter of a minister and were invited to an event like that. Yeah. A very important thing in all this is beware of data protection and privacy. I just say it. I don't want to say that we got problems with that, but it's a very, very difficult issue you have to mention in all this procedure. Okay. The procedure of the citizens' dialogues for itself, you can see here directly after the arrival of the. Oh, probably I forgot something. We did made experience when 1,000 persons of a city get a letter from Prime Minister, 60 to 80 is the show rate let me say, to a general theme. The general theme was we would like to talk about the future of Europe, probably in these themes. More we didn't say in the letter. And we had a show rate of 60 to 80 persons. We did in other forms, probably on the transborder regions, other citizens dialogues, there the show rate is, of course, much higher or a little bit higher, because the themes are much more concrete than we did it in this dialogue. Directly after arriving, the people had to answer the 2 questions for getting started. If I hear Europe, I think my European Union needs in future. Then we go on with a one-to-many method. Which themes are the most important for you today? For 1 minute on table already. Then please discuss these themes with your neighbor for 3 minutes. And then please name the 5 to 8 most important themes at your table, 10 minutes. So the theme selection and the theme allocation were totally free at the citizens' dialogues. This clustering and allocation was done by the moderation, and afterwards we got a little bit guided discussion along the questions, what do I like about the EU and what do I not like about the EU? And after that we backed them to create or sample already concrete ideas about how to implement the ideas they sampled in the first 2 or 3 hours. Okay. I think it's not so interesting here which is the result. Therefore, I got the booklets we got afterwards with the result of all the process. You can look at it there. Let me just say 1 word to what happened afterwards. We heard already that the most important thing is that the participants have to have the feeling that something will be done with the ideas they developed and they said. So directly afterwards, we got on the whole process, we got over 3,000 pages of protocols. We needed a long time to discuss all this in the administrative and political atmosphere. But we tried, let me say a number, 80–90% of the ideas were sampled, were overtaken in the booklet afterwards, and we got a decision of the cabinet on the ministerial level, and as well an information at least in the parliament of Baden-Württemberg. So if you want to say, the regional government overtook the ideas as their own, and gave them to the Commission and to the federal government, and at this point of time to nearly 5,000 to 6,000 persons in the administration of the on the European level, and we took 20 to 30 of the participants as well to different events to Brussels as well. Therefore, the feedback afterwards, what the participants or what the citizens thought about all the process was very, very positive. Was very, very positive. That's a good notion.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Christian, for this very good summary of the consultation process on Europe in Baden-Württemberg. Now, before we get to the three questions that we would like to discuss with our speakers here, I would like to turn to you to grab your phone very quickly so that we can get a bit of a feeling what you think, at this stage. Now, having heard all these details and all this information, and so that you can share with us also your experience, the prior experience, because I'm sure for many of you this is not a new topic. If you can please just open your browsers and go to slido.com, enter #EULocal, and maybe also the speakers, if they like, can join us here as well. And also, please, all of you who are watching us over web stream, please grab your phones and join in. If you are already there, that should not take you long. You will see a statement that goes like this: a fixed number of topics for the citizens' assemblies should be selected in advance at EU level. So we're trying to get a bit of feeling what you think, how these consultations should be constructed at EU level. So if you can share with us what you think, agree, disagree, I don't know, very simple. Do I hear a lot of bureaucrats here? Would be interesting then later on to see, to hear from our speakers who are not from the EU level what they think actually. Thank you very much for all your answers. I'm not trying to influence here. Very good. Okay. And maybe now we have one more question for you. We can go to the second question perhaps now. And the question is more about the who should be involved in these assemblies. So the question goes: do you think that the assemblies for European citizens' consultations should be representative of the city or region where they take place? And so far, we can see this. The direction, at least, seems to be clear. Thank you so much for taking the phones and taking the poll with us. I hope this was useful for you, and I'm sure this was useful for our speakers as well. And now let's get on with our questions to the speakers. I mean, in all four of these presentations, we have heard a lot about how the citizens have been selected in the projects that you've been involved in. What do you think, about the selection of citizens for any type of European type of consultation? So that perhaps Christian gets just a bit more rest. Maybe I turn first to Martin. If you can take the floor, please.
From my perspective, the key question with regards to the EU consultation goes like this. Do we create just one sample of people from all 27 or 28, hopefully 28 countries? Or do we start with the national assemblies, which at the end meet together? So this is like a fundamental question. So it's actually very easy to create EU on a small scale, and actually a trial of this was done last year right here because the citizens panel was organized with 100 people. actually this group could go like to 200 or something like this to be perceived as representative enough and also small enough so that the deliberation can take place. But I would start with the question, do we need local national assemblies first, or is it just one big assembly enough?
How about starting from the ground? How about consulting at a local level, but on consultation that would have a European dimension and that could then, whose results then could feed into the European decision-making process?
Yes, that's actually what I'm thinking about. That one of the problems, as I understand it, what people think about the EU is that EU is somewhere there, over there in Brussels. And that's why I would start with bringing the EU to the national level first. But for this, if you deliberate with people, and if it's the permanent group, I would recommend creating it with this whole set of demographic criteria on the local level, and as a second stage, all those groups from all member states could meet together like one big, huge group for final decision making, and also listening to people from our countries. That's how I would recommend the process.
Thank you for that, Martin. Now I turn to Christian. What would you recommend based on your experience at the regional level?
I totally agree with the person before, because we got the experience in the process, in the dialogue, discussion with people about the future of Europe they had a very positive opinion about the European Union. But if you try to choose them from a European level, nobody will, this is something I say nobody will participate in this, because they do not recognize or they cannot recognize a known phase or a known procedure or a known impact on their local or regional level. So I think top-down would not work.
Thank you for that. Vanessa, would you like to add on?
Maybe just quickly from a civil society perspective, at least the way we work is if we don't have this kind of very good-sounding mechanism, is that we have to improve our network and include as many different organizations as possible. This is something that we have seen in France, where a member was organizing consultations, and there were a big number of other organizations involved. It wasn't only them, it wasn't only the French government. You have businesses also in there. So I think this network can help. And the other interesting thing that I found interesting, which was given to us as feedback from France, was that they reached very different people with the events that were taking place inside, sort of typical consultations indoors, and the activities that they did outside in the streets, because that was actually also part of their activities. The group that they reached in the streets was much more diverse and much more mixed. So this would be a more sort of perspective on, if you don't have that mechanism, how do you reach out to diverse people? Yeah.
Thank you. Ormo, we've heard a lot about the methodology from these very concrete projects. And we've heard different words. Random selection was one of the kind of key aspects that was placed here. What do you think is important methodology-wise for the selection of participants in any type of consultation that has a European dimension?
It is important to remember that the different selection methods provide you with different sort of input into these processes, and it's not that one is more important than another. It could be that you feel that you already have one but not yet another type of input, and therefore you'd had to focus more on that. In our process, it was 3 different phases and 3 different types of input. So we started with a very open crowdsourcing, and clearly those who turned up were the most active people. So you could say that interest groups were represented in this phase, and we got their views there. So the second phase was expert input, that we invited them to come in and the third was random selection, so it was informed public opinion. As opposed to just a rare public opinion without necessarily any sufficient information. So all of these do matter in policy making, all this sort of inputs, but and clearly this informed public opinion should be used mostly in those cases which are generally affecting the public as such. So you don't have to ask public opinion on each matter clearly, because it's a long and also expensive process.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, it was interesting that all of you have, without having seen each other's presentations before, have mentioned the importance of methodology first, but then the second clearly important element was the topics and how do you go about the topics. So my question is, how should one go about choosing a topic for any type of European citizens' assemblies? Should it be one topic for all? Should we be able to choose from a list of topics that are decided at an EU level in advance? Or if there's a choice to just freely choose the topic at that particular or by that particular citizens' assembly, can we go about it in a meaningful way so that then the harvest can be moved on to in a meaningful way to the decision-making level? Anyone?
So, actually, agenda setting, choosing the topics is like it's an important part, and there is a lot of power behind it, because for some politicians it might be useful not to talk about some issues, while at the same time it might be important for the citizens. And then again, so since this is so important, I would also recommend including some learning about this, some deliberation, and this brings us to the concept of organizing a separate, like a citizens' assembly, to choose the topics. And actually this is done in Belgium, in East Belgium, in the German-speaking community, where they have created a sort of a citizen senate, when there is one body for agenda setting and separate citizens' assemblies to deal with those topics chosen previously also by randomly selected group, because it's so important.
Thank you for that. And by the way, for all of you in the audience and for all of you who are watching us over web stream, we have heard the examples of Ireland. We have heard the examples of eastern part of Belgium here. We will have speakers coming from these parts presenting their projects in the different parts of this series. So please, stay tuned and share this with your colleagues as well. Anyone else wants to come on to this question? Vanessa, please.
I think also for the comparability of the outcome, it's very important to have maybe also a set, for example, through experts, a set of topics. But within these decided priorities, I think it's maybe good to have some space to see, depending on the country, the region, how can we address this best? And maybe there's a certain point of this area, say it's sustainability or environmental protection, that is key to citizens in that area. So I think timing is also another important factor. It's definitely a tricky question, but to make these results comparable and transparent, I think an expert group is a good solution. Another option would be to ask citizens, I don't know, via surveys, what do you care about, and to actually address. Sometimes I find it's very abstract to ask citizens, what is your opinion on the future of Europe? Maybe you have to ask a different question to get the answers that you want.
Thank you. I'm looking left or right. It's no pressure.
No, I believe that the agenda setting is a responsibility of an organizer in the sense that it would be perhaps unresponsible just to invite people together without making it clear what is it for and why are you taking their time? So for me, it seems more logical that the question is raised by the organizers, but at the same time, obviously, there have to be a chance for people to speak about the issues that do matter to them. I mentioned in Estonian case that we identified 5 topics where we felt that the input is needed, and where we felt that we are capable of following also up later with work with the parliament. But in addition, we had also the 6th option on the website. People, if you want to propose any other ideas that don't fall under these 5 categories, you can do it. You can do it here under the 6th category. It's just that we, as the organizers, don't take responsibility. That we won't be working with them. But however, it's an open source, so anyone, if you find good ideas that you want to take from here and start working with them, then it's go ahead and just do it. So both can be possible. Open space method, where people come together and start identifying topics that are important to them, or meeting where you already have the topic and people, but you have to just know what are you looking from people. Are you organizing an event to collect ideas and find new ideas? Do you want to use this process for decision making, or do you want to use it for consultation and finding out which potential solutions have bigger support among participants? So these require different methods, but they are all fair things to do under the circumstances.
Thank you. I'm also mindful of time, so that we can also give room to you for your questions. So let's touch on the 3rd question very quickly. And now I'm looking at you, Christian, as well, because in a way you have delivered your consultation process, and you try to bring the results of that process to the EU institutions. So how, in your view, should the results of these EU type of citizens consultations be brought to the decision-making process in a way that we don't face that frustration that was echoed here all around, that any citizens involved in these consultations would just feel, okay, now I've said what I wanted to say, and now so what, Thank you.
Okay, first of all, this is connected to the former question, I think, because if you choose a theme on the European level, for example, we talk now about sustainability or environmental protection, then it's very necessary and obligatory, in my opinion, that you explain really good in which legislative processing on EU level or national level or regional level this theme will have an impact on the lives of the participants. So we choose the theme environmental protection, and we say at the same time, in 2 years we will have a big decision about emissions on the European level. If you don't have that, I cannot see any possibility to get involved in the to get involved, to bring involved the opinions of the people in the legislative decision-making process. And it's probably a little bit rare what I will say now. What you need as well is the clear signal to the people who are involved, to the participants, that you have a border for the impact of their opinions, because we had it in Baden-Württemberg as well. We did like 3 or 4 weeks discussions in political and administrative spheres. Which things we could choose and which things are not. And this result should be connected back to the people, should be transparent. They had to know after the process which selection you did, this opinion will be, or this idea will be developed for the legislative process and this idea not. You cannot overgive them the decision making, but you can let them know why you choose that and for which reason you choose that.
Thank you for that. I think that was a very good kind of wrap up to these questions. And now I would like to open the floor to you from the audience. We have time to take several questions. Yes, please. The gentleman over there.
Thank you. Professor Linson from the IMNRC. As some of you know, I'm a neuroscientist. I'm also a candidate for the forthcoming European Commission presidential elections. 3 reactions, short reactions, don't worry. Christian, you spoke of the future of Europe. Well, to my mind, Europe has no future as structured. There is a need for a fundamental institutional architectural revolution to give it some hope. That's one thing. The other, Urmo, yes, citizens need to be listened to much more, definitely. You spoke of this initiative of arranging tables and facilitators to discuss and so forth. So I note that there was 80% satisfaction with the intellectual entertainment provided. I mean, trust is something much deeper. I often ask in an audience, who trusts whom in this audience? And lastly, regarding your initiative, I'm sorry, I think you are reinventing the wheel, misappropriating ideas of others and turning them into yours for your own politico-financial benefits without the slightest recognition. Assuming that EU cohesion would be possible, which it is not, in a bubble, which it is not, this would be artificial and therefore non-sustainable. So why not replace a European citizen initiative by a world citizen initiative? And this is exactly what we have been working on with the new capacity building program. There are 140 countries participating. And this initiative, which is going on now, has been systematically ignored by the EESC, by the Committee of Regions, and by some at the European Commission. And I'm also very surprised that we have not even been invited as panelists. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Before the speakers can answer, I would like to take some more questions. Thank you.
Yes, Yuri Zozar, EC. Thank you for the panelists for very interesting presentations. I would like to know a little bit more of the follow-up, how the selected citizens, how they've been continuously informed from the legislative feedback at the local, regional, national, or from the EU level. And then maybe Urmo Kübar touched upon a little bit of the costs. If you have made a cost analysis, how expensive those consultations are. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I think my colleague also has a question that came from the web stream. Martin?
Yeah, we receive a question on the Facebook stream. Can you give some concrete examples of discussions on EU topics following Citizens' Assembly's model?
Thank you. And before the speakers start replying, are there any other burning questions for the moment? Yes.
I have a question about media coverage. How was the media coverage of the other citizens' initiatives and assemblies? Because when we did the Europe dialogue in Baden-Württemberg, we felt a bit baffled that there were nearly no news coverage about what we've made. It was a bit disappointing. I just want to learn from your experiences here.
Thank you very much for these very pertinent questions. I already saw signaling from Christian's side that he would like to reply to something.
Should I quickly reply to the last one? That was the easiest one, I think.
Sure.
From all the questions. On the media coverage, I don't have examples from all our member organizations, but I know from France, for example, that the way they worked around this problem, which is definitely a problem that we face also, I mean, in Brussels, but in other countries, that they had partnerships with certain media. Those were also media that were already focused on European issues, so I think that's something that needs to be expanded, but it's when organizing these consultations far enough in advance, media has to be informed, and I think depending on what kind of media it is, obviously, if it's more local or national focused, the topics will kind of, whether they fit or not, that's up to the media to decide, but if they're part of this, maybe that gets it more in the media.
Thank you. Christian?
Okay, I just could say something to the costs of the process in Baden-Württemberg with all the structure with different expert groups, and they were not working for money, but you need the reimbursement of travel cost, for example, for some of the citizens. You need a backup teams always. You need an agency for moderation and sampling, because we were 2-3 people working at this in the ministries. You are not able to even moderating or sampling one of the citizens' dialogues. So we got nearly, without the costs of me or my colleagues, because we are paid already, we could do other things as well. We had nearly 250,000 euro. It's quite a lot, I know it's quite a lot.
I continue. Yeah, about media coverage. In our case, it was relatively easy. The coverage was huge, but it was also because, as I mentioned, the process started with very pressing issues in society. So there were these petitions and protests on the street, so everyone was interested. However, when we were in the phase of putting together this random sample for the Deliberation Day, so and we use a polling company as our partner organization. So and when they went to people and asked whether they would be willing to participate on that Deliberation Day, there was still a huge number of people who had never ever heard about that there is any process going on that. So. But the media coverage was huge. It's just you have to remember that it didn't reach all the population, and obviously I'm sure that that with European issues getting this coverage is more difficult than with national or with local issues. About costs, also in our case, the organizing work was done on voluntary basis, and yes, there was some compensation for participants so that they wouldn't have to pay their own transportation to come to Tallinn, but we didn't compensate their time, so that was their contribution that they dedicated the whole day. The biggest cost was again this putting together this random sample by a polling company. So there was no one who, because it was also quite a huge work. So there was no one who was willing to do it pro bono, but we had to buy it. And you also asked about follow-up, which is very important. In our case, the outcome, there were certain legal changes adopted by the parliament as a result of this inputs that came from People's Assembly, and to be honest, it's not very little. It's quite okay thing. If there are some laws were changed about party financing and for opening up the landscape for parties, etc. However, even more important as this particular results of the number of laws changed, etc. I think is the attitude of the parliament, who starts working with these suggestions or input that comes through these processes. And here I'm absolutely sure that our parliament could have done much better and shown up much more respect and gratitude towards the work that these people did. But I think the issue was that the parliament still felt it a bit as an attack towards them, so that there is someone else who wants to take over the roles that they should be having, and therefore they rather choose to be a bit arrogant and a bit ignorant, and take more time than perhaps needed to discuss these issues, and I guess that left to the majority of participants that didn't left a good feeling of all of this.
It's very interesting to hear that buy-in needs to be on both sides. We need to create buy-in in those people who are participating in these consultations, but of course we have to create sufficient buy-in also on the part of those people or institutions where those results are then going to. So, any remarks to the questions from you, Martin?
The costs on the local level in Poland are between, let's say, 25 to 50,000 euro per one event. And since we have a very efficient methodology of random selections, that's really very small cost for us, because we have a software which goes for random selection of the database, and then we send out the letters, and the cost of sending the letters is already covered by the agreement with the post. And actually in Belgium the local authorities don't pay at all for sending out letters, so it is very efficient. It depends on the method you choose. And the media coverage, on the local level, it was reported that the process takes place, and also what I'm kind of happy about is that 1 year after the first Citizens' Assembly, which one was on the flood prevention, there was another torrential rain, and the city was better prepared, and the feeling was that the recommendations were taken up, and they were. So the reaction of the city was better, and the feeling was that it made sense to organize this Citizens' Assembly, because the results, the effects were visible.
Thank you very much for that. And before I give you all the floor for your kind of final thoughts or keywords, I would like to invite you to grab your phones just one more time. Go back to slido.com. Hopefully you haven't left the browser. Maybe you have that window already open. Put in #EULocal, and you will hear or see, actually you can hear from me and you can see on your screen a question that deals about how do we do this together as EU institutions. So how important do you consider that EU citizens' consultations are carried out in cooperation between EU institutions? 1, not so much. 5, you feel quite strongly about it. Thank you for your votes, and thank you for your votes also from those watching us over a web stream. I think we can say pretty much the tendency goes, if we do this together, then the effects and the results could be better. Now, with the lunch just a couple of minutes away from us, I would like to invite our speakers just to give us their final concluding thought, one sentence, maybe a keyword that they would like us to take home with us, and maybe also convey to the next round of these seminars. Christian, please.
Thank you very much. We did not really a citizens' assembly in Baden-Württemberg, but we tried to do a broad discussion about a very, very general theme, the future of the European Union. And first of all, we always thought, okay, they will criticize everything. They will criticize us, they will criticize the European Union for everything which is going wrong in their lives. But we were very, very surprised that also in the online survey, over 80 and 90% really said we need a stronger European Union in the big themes, and we need a less strong European Union in regional themes. What I want to give you as a last message probably, do not think that you know already what the citizens are thinking about such themes like the future of Europe or other things. You will be surprised what they are knowing and how positive, in our case, how positive they are seeing themes were brought in from the European level.
Thank you for that. Martin, one concluding sentence from your side?
Well, I will be very happy to see a new mechanism of engaging regular citizens in decision-making in between the elections on the EU level, which does not exist. I mean, consultations are important, this is fine, but I mean real decision-making on the EU level. This would really make give this feeling that EU belongs to the people.
Thank you for that. Vanessa, please.
I think it's a good sign that we're having these discussions, and I think it's going in the right direction, although I believe that we're still very much at the beginning when we're talking about the EU level of involving citizens in the decision-making process. But using these examples, for example, from the local level or from the national level, should serve as a source of inspiration to carry on this and to develop, as you say, as Martin said, a kind of process that works.
Okay, Urma, now the pressure's on you to really wrap this up in one nice sentence.
And I will conclude with perhaps a personal note that this Deliberation Day 6 years ago is still, I guess, one of the happiest days in my professional career. It started with people being quite skeptical about how this should work. They arrived from all the different parts of Estonia, didn't know each other, and they perhaps didn't know too much about the topics that they were expected to discuss. And when this discussion started in the table, everyone was like, it seemed such a fragile, this trust was built between participants that you also mentioned. And it seems that this was such a new experience for many that yes, this actually works, and we are. It's interesting to have this discussion between us. We don't have to defend our positions. We don't have to attack other people. We don't have to prove that they are wrong and I'm right. But we can have an intelligent discussion between each other, and. So this is a powerful feeling of building this trust, and I think this teaches us a lot about, or there are these learning points that we could take from these discussions to also our everyday lives.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. I would really like to give a really warm thanks to all our speakers for their really good inputs. I also feel more empowered now because I've received all this interesting information. Really thank for your good presentations, for good energy. Big thanks to the audience, to your very good questions. And I'm really hoping we can meet again here at one of these lunchtime seminars very soon. Now the lunch is outside, and thank you so much, and have a good rest of the afternoon.